these festivals are about discovery. It's such an awesome thing that we get to do, but you have to be at the right moment in your career for it to work, right? You have to you have to be ready for that festival sort of appearance to sort of take advantage of all the other things that are going on in your career. It doesn't really do a lot to just be there. It does a lot to be there at the right time.
Why does that matter?
Look, generally, you're going to play in front of a lot of people who don't know you. Right festival slot at the right time means that you're getting exposed to people that have never seen you. So I think your show has to be at the point that it can connect with those types of people, and all the other things that are going on in your career, when you're going to come back to the market next, what kind of product you have out, what is going on with you in terms of your general audience building and your following and how you're communicating with that following. So all of that has to align in the right way. And again, the best managers, the best agents are ones that are talking to the bookers strategically in that regard.
What's going on? Welcome to The New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business. The book, third edition, is out now everywhere. Hardcover, ebook, audiobook, however you like books, you can find the book. Today, my guest is Rick Farman. He's one of the co-founders of Outside Lands, the festival, and he co-founded the company Superfly, which runs Outside Lands, Bonnaroo, the Friends Experience, and I think somewhere upwards of 50 festivals throughout the years that he's been part of Superfly. Today, we do spend most of our time discussing Outside Lands, which is the festival famously, of course, in Golden Gate Park, and it is happening this year. Actually, as you're listening to this, just a couple weeks away. Actually, maybe by the time you're listening to this, a couple days away, August 8th through 10th in Golden Gate Park. It's in its 17th year now. This year, they have massive artists like they do every year, but Tyler, the Creator, Hozier, Doja Cat, Anderson .Paak, John Summit, previous guest on the pod, John Summit, who we had, and so many others. It's a great festival, Golden Gate Park. If you haven't been there, really interesting. They bring in a lot of the San Francisco culture to this festival. So today we discuss all things that make Outside Lands special, but we also go into the history of Superfly. We talk a little bit about Bonnaroo. We talk about how he got started in the festival business and the festival creation business, kind of curating these concert experiences, and he goes into the history of that and how he got started with that, and also just a little bit of the business behind festivals and how all that works. We even talk about the show posters and how the negotiations on the names that go in there and everything that kind of goes into the business of a modern day festival, which is so much more than just the music. And San Francisco and specifically the Outside Lands Festival has a very interesting, unique take on all of that. And make sure you stick around to the end. He actually, as part of the live music experience business, he's got an interesting outlook on where we can go as an industry and what is important to the music industry and specifically for artists and how to make it in this new music business. So stick around for his answer at the end. Check out Outside Lands August 8th through 10th this year in Golden Gate Park. You can find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on the socials. Find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram. But most importantly, right now, pause this episode, leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, and make sure you visit aristake.com and get on our email list. That is the best way to stay in touch with us. We'll let you know about all new episodes and all the happenings of the new music business that you need to know about. aristake.com, get on the email list. All right, let's kick into the show. Rick Farman, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Ari.
All right. So Outside Lands, man, this is your 17th season, 17th year of this festival. Yeah. That's wild. I feel like you're like at one point it was the new kid on the block, and now it's such an established entity, and it's like it's one of the premier festivals that everybody talks about and that everyone wants to hit, and it's risen to this point. I guess Radiohead put it on the map back in the day, and everyone's got the stories of Radiohead. Man, so many of my friends, Radiohead, I think it was the second time around, everyone's got a story of traversing the country to make their way to Radiohead 2016 Outside Lands. But give me a little brief background of Outside Lands and how you got involved with it and started the whole festival and why. And I know you have a lot of experience with festivals and experiences and all of that, but we'll focus Outside Lands first, and then, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, we, as sort of we were starting to get into the festival business, and we were looking for opportunities. We had the good fortune of coming in contact with the Another Planet folks, with Greg Perloff and Sherry Wasserman and Alan Scott. And they, were pretty early on in starting their business. And, we were, early on in kind of our journey of creating festivals. And we just created this match that we're like, hey, we both are sort of doing some different things. And if we bring them together, it could be really powerful. I think the thing that sort of foundationally underwrote it all was the fact that the Bay Area didn't have a large scale music festival.
Yeah.
And for us who were looking for festival opportunities at Superfly, it was one of those things where it seemed kind of crazy for such an amazing music market, one of the tops in the country, if not the world, that it didn't have a festival, that was sort of part of representing that, amazing tradition and history that the Bay Area has had. I think the other crucial thing was that we knew that the culture of San Francisco and sort of the music going community and all the different things that were around it, it felt really sort of similar to us, to other spots like in New Orleans that had enough kind of there to sort of build a festival around, and to make kind of the mission being representing that, culture and the creative, community that existed there, coupled with bringing in, national talent and stuff that, people in that community would want to see from the outside. So that was it. That was what seemed like kind of the amazing opportunity. Like any sort of new venture, there's always reasons for thinking why it wouldn't work. And there were plenty of, good examples. Why isn't this happening now? And you could kind of go through the reasons. But at the end of the day, I think it was, just simply that, folks like Alan Scott at Another Planet, there weren't entrepreneurs that were sort of focused on, breaking down those barriers, jumping over those, hurdles, to make something happen in a really dynamic market like this. And so that's sort of, was the task for us. And we're very fortunate that we were able to do it and that we're still here today doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a feat to run a festival that long. And I know that you started Bonnaroo, I guess it was a few years prior to Outside Lands. Now, I'm curious because, so is Superfly still running Bonnaroo? I know that, did you pass it off officially to Live Nation? And right.
Yeah, that's right. So we no longer run Bonnaroo.
Right.
We initially did our deal with Live Nation in 2015. And then in 2019, we transitioned it over to the C3 group. And we couldn't be, happier that they're the people that are taking on that legacy. Those guys are contemporaries of ours, friends of ours, and people who had, been coming to the festival for years and experiencing it as fans. And so for us to sort of take something like that and have it in the hands of people that, we knew, understood it and would know how to steward it in the, going forward environment, it was really, really great gift for us. And now, we get to, spend even more time on Outside Lands.
Yeah, I was actually at I think the Bonnaroo 2015, that final independent one. And it's, I mean, I had an incredible time there and it was a lot of fun. I do remember a security guard, though, taking away my joint during one of the sets of the thing. And I was like, that's Tennessee for you. But I know at Outside Lands, you've gone the complete opposite direction. You have something called Grasslands. Tell me a little bit about that and how that came to be, and just kind of, I guess, just like how you approach, people are going to festivals to expand themselves in all facets of whatever that means to someone, whether, it's through the experience, it's through music, it's through substance, it's through all of the above. But how you approach something like that and work with the local communities, whether it's, a more conservative Tennessee when it comes to, and just the politics and the laws and all of that, or a much more progressive San Francisco and everything in between.
Well, whenever you're producing a large scale event like this, the coordination with the community you're in is paramount, right? You have to meet them where they're at. You have to be a partner. You have to be respectful of kind of what's going on in that community and really find the ways to, do what you want to do in a way that, is really harmonious with that. And so that's kind of always been our disposition around this, which is,
Yeah.
with kind of the community, work with what we've got. We're very lucky to be, I think, globally, the only major large scale festival that has legal sales and consumption of cannabis. So that's quite a unique opportunity for us, and a lot of it was driven based on the fact that cannabis became legal in California, and the Bay Area and San Francisco proper had set a regime around what that meant, and we were able to really come in through that door and try and help the city of San Francisco pioneer how you apply that to an event, how you create an event where it can be served and consumed in a safe and responsible and thoughtful manner. And so it's really was really working hard with the local powers that be to make sure that we were doing it in a way that would hit all those marks. Fortunately for me at Superfly and our team, we have these great partners at Another Planet who have super deep, long-standing relationships throughout the San Francisco Bay Area community. They've been doing really unique things all over the city, reviving historic venues and creating all these opportunities. And I think when it came time to be a pioneer in this field, that there was a trust level that already existed between those powers that be and our team and the Another Planet team. And so look, the bottom line is it's part of Bay Area culture. It's part of Northern California culture. It has been for a long time. And so to be able to fulfill our mission of bringing that stuff to the festival, it was a logical thing for everybody to figure out how to do in the right way.
Cool. So tell me about how the lineup typically comes together. I mean, you've always had premier talent since day one, since the first year, I believe in 2008, that you had this with Radiohead. But, do you who's in charge of putting the talent together? What goes into those considerations? When do you start booking the lineup for the next year? And just talk about the talent.
Yeah, so there's a booking team that's led by Alan Scott at Another Planet.
Okay.
It's a group effort. There's a bunch of different bookers on the call. There's some folks from Superfly who really understand what's going on in the music community and where all the trends are at. And the basic thing is that it's kind of a year-round thing. Right. And we usually try and start with what the headliners are going to be, who the biggest acts are, because they're planning the most furthest in advance. And really, because we're trying to build like a balance of what the programming is, we're trying to make sure we hit certain buckets and, have things that make it, diverse and that it, can appeal to a wide swath of people. We hopefully start with those building blocks. What are the top artists? What are the ones that we kind of know that are really, going to be cresting at the time of the festival, the ones that are doing, putting out new product or have something interesting going on. And we start with those and we try and fill around those to make sure we're, hitting all of the things we want to represent and present.
Yeah. And I mean, they are all very premier, talent. And I know, like, famously last year, I think it was last year, maybe it was 2 years at this point, and I guess it was last year, Chapel Roan, as like this breakout artist was, when she hit all the festivals, it just like the stages couldn't contain her. Tell me about kind of that set and how that, what happens when you book an artist and after you've already kind of slotted them in, they explode into superstardom.
It's really interesting how these things work. And sometimes it's just magic, right? That the right artist plays the right stage at the right time. And you can see it being transformative for the artist. You can see it being transformative for the audience and their feeling about that artist, their feeling about the festival. It's one of the cool things about festivals is that it is putting these artists in sort of very different atmospheres than they do on their normal tours. It's putting them in front of different audiences. It's putting them in different physical environments, being outdoors, being, in a historic place like Golden Gate Park, which can be really inspirational. And so we've had a bunch of different moments like that where just the magic happens. And obviously, that performance you were referencing before is a classic example of it. We've had that happen, fortunately, a bunch of different times.
Yeah. how much, when it comes to the booking of the talent, are there, I mean, I know you have so many different stages there and varying in sizes, and I believe you have a new stage this year as well that's a bit more intimate. What, like, I guess booking the talent comes first, I would imagine, and then slotting it into the various stages, I would imagine, kind of comes a little bit later. I'm curious, like, the team around all of that. I mean, it's got to be some big puzzle that gets put together when you have these headliners, because not everybody can fit on the main stage. Of course, you have so many stages. So tell me about, like, well, first off, how many stages are you at now, and with music happening simultaneously?
I want to say there's 6, maybe 7 stages
Yeah.
outside
Okay.
Lands this year.
Wild.
You know, the booking process really is super detailed in the area you're talking about. When you book an artist, you're generally booking the stage that they're going to play on, and to certain capacity, the slot that they're going to play. And there's, sometimes dialogue about who's going to be playing before and who's going to be playing after that artist, depending where in the booking cycle they're coming in and kind of what size artists they are. And so we're always trying to sort of find these things where we can have kind of like a flow of what that stage is. And, in a way, almost a community too, of who's going to be backstage, spending time with each other, and kind of what the whole feel of that particular stage is going to be. One of the things also that's really unique about Outside Lands is this site that we have, Golden Gate Park, and the different meadows that we have, almost are like 3 or 4 different kind of festival venues. A lot of festivals, right? It's just one big open field and you kind of have to make the venue. Well, this is this venue that has like been crafted, by, amazing groundskeepers and arborists and all and planned in this really extensive way to serve the public of San Francisco in this awesome way. We get to come in and sort of use that to build on top of. And each little stage area kind of has a distinct feel, and we try and match the artists and the kind of community that we're trying to build around that to sort of feel like it fits that particular venue.
Yeah, because I mean, in addition to the music, of course, there's a lot of other experiences and just other like installations. And I know that's something that Superfly is specialized in, is just experiential entertainment and immersive experiences and all of that. Talk to me about just kind of, I guess, the philosophy behind creating immersive experiences, maybe in general, but then also when it comes to a festival environment.
Yeah. So I think in general, one of the things that we've always kind of thought about is like how what's going on in media and entertainment culture is affecting experiences. And, when you use the kind of term immersive, what I start to sort of think about and what, comes out for me is that a lot of our at-home entertainment has become something where we have a lot more agency, gaming, we have a lot more choices. We have a lot more sort of feeling of like interactivity within that. And so in a way, we're trying to sort of pick up on that trend of what people are experiencing in other forms of entertainment and bring them to the festival, create a dynamic where you can have more interactivity, where you have a little bit more, choose your own adventure, agency of your experience. And so that's sort of that immersive part is sort of coming from there. And a lot of times it's really trying to think about how to integrate a particular cultural art form into what we're doing, right? So good example, at Outside Lands is sort of how all of the food and beverage stuff manifests there, right? Okay. We have all of your kind of, utility stuff, right? And it's all very high end. We try and really make sure that all local. So we have over 200 local food items being served at the event. And that's all throughout the event. But we're also trying to match that in different areas with, things that are themed in that way. So for instance, we have an area called Winelands where we have, all these purveyors of wine from Napa and Sonoma area. And that's its own distinct area where, you can kind of go in for that experience. You can kind of, have an opportunity to talk with the winemakers. We did a similar thing like you're talking about with Grasslands before. We do a similar thing with Beerlands. So we're trying to make sure that all of that stuff sort of is really well integrated into the general experience, and that you also can kind of transport yourself into these different areas. So it's not just one big hodgepodge of things.
And if you want to get married, you can get married too now, I guess.
Yeah, and that's a great one to think of too. Like, again, we're always trying to think about what is special about Bay Area culture and what can we
Yeah.
express through that. Last year was the 20th anniversary of the first gay marriage in California in San Francisco, and it happened at City Hall in San
Oh,
Francisco,
wow.
and that's why we
Yeah,
decided
that's
to
right.
create this area. One of our employees who had was a huge music festival fan. She had actually gotten married at a festival, and she came back to us
Huh.
and she's like, "Hey, this was really cool. There's this whole thing going on with San Francisco and how much marriage is sort of an important thing around here. Let's see what we can do to integrate that into the festival." It was fun to have one of our staff members come to an idea, and there we go. We were in the
Hmm.
field 6 months later with her actually manifesting it. So it's really cool, where the inspiration comes from all different places. And, our
Hmm.
job is to sort of make sure that we're, bringing the best things to the table.
Yeah. So, I mean, with the 200 local food items and the vendors and the wine, I mean, you're bringing that kind of San Francisco or at least Northern California culture to it all. Talk to me about the art, because that's another kind of like, I guess, experience that's so prominent. That's part of so many festivals, but with Outside Lands and who curates the art? Tell me about the kind of like how you bring in these artists and just how they're integrated naturally and just like the exhibits and all of that.
Yeah. So first we start with having a team of people that focus on creative production, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
people who are trying to sort of meld the operational sort of things that we have to do logistically and build all the stages with what can we do to create the most interesting environment. And that team covers everything from what like the food vendors would look like to a lot of
Mm.
these activations that you're talking with, even working with some of our
Yeah.
brand partners to make sure those things are done in a way that fits the whole flow and motif and vibe of the festival. So
Right.
we're of course, integrated into that is visual arts, right? Visual arts, is a
Mm-hmm.
huge part of the Bay Area. We're in the Golden Gate Park where we have, some of the best art museums like the De Young in the world. And so we really are trying to find every single place that is an open canvas, whether it's like, the fence lines, right? Hey, let's use that as an opportunity to put visual art, the
Mm.
tunnels that come into the festival. And then there are specific programs like our Outsider Art program where, we're working with local artists to actually create stuff on site that's being inspired by what's going on at the festival during the time. So the visual art component, is always sort of something that, obviously complements, perfectly with music and festivals. Obviously, the Bay Area has this huge history of poster art and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We're always trying to, make sure that we're representing that at the highest level.
Right, right, with and street artists and of course and all of that. Um, cool. And so in terms of like, I want to get kind of deeper down into the weeds a little bit, and I'm not sure how much you touch touch that when it comes to the operations, but in terms of like because we're on the New Music Business podcast, so I want to get into like the music business part of all of this just a bit, because we have a lot of artists tuning in, we have a lot of artist managers, booking agents that are listening. It's just like a lot of them. So I guess at its core, we talked about how you go about choosing the artist. And of course, like, every festival is like, all right, we got to sell tickets. We put the biggest artists in the world, they'll sell tickets. But when it kind of comes down to some of these more emerging artists, what goes into that a little bit? And more so, if you're speaking to artists, if you're speaking to managers, you're speaking to booking agents, like, how does one get to play Outside Lands? And who are the channels? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah. So I think the base level, right, is most of the artists that are going to play Outside Lands are fairly established, right? They have,
Mm-hmm.
proper management and agents. This is not like generally the place for really new upstart artists to come just because it's a very big platform. And I
Right.
think really what generally is the case is that, those representatives are talking to the booking team, all the bookers, and
Mm-hmm.
they're when it's done right, they're not just thinking about, hey, when can I play outside lands and what's the outside lands play. It's a fluid conversation about what that artist's trajectory is in the market. Where are you playing sort of to get established? Once you're established, what's the right sort of pathway, between soft ticket shows, hard ticket shows, between playing a theater or an arena, an outdoor venue, and because Another Planet, our partners are so versed in this, they have so many different venues around town that they are
Right.
really working with the talent to sort of chart a course, and hopefully on that course is the right performance at Outside Lands.
Mm-hmm.
From the Outside Lands perspective, what we're trying to do is book a diversity of artists, because Outside Lands is an incredibly diverse festival from the people that are coming to it, both age diversity, certainly ethnic diversity is really unique. We have out at Outside Lands, and we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to make sure that this is like got something for everybody, right? And the Bay Area is unique in that regard, right? It is diverse in a lot of ways, and the concert going audience is really diverse. Especially from the age perspective, you have lots of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s going to, 1, 2, 3, 4 concerts a month. And as well as like a really strong youth audience that's going to a lot of concerts. And so we're always trying to make sure that like people have enough for what is the value for them to come out to the festival. What's been really nice for us doing it over time now is that people have made this a tradition. So you have people who, their kids are now coming. Sometimes they're coming with them. Sometimes they're coming alone. I hear from a lot of, people who have kids at the festival. Hey, we'll go out and we'll see a couple things that they want to see. I'll go and see a couple things, that they want me to go to, then we'll meet up for lunch. They'll expose me to some new stuff. And that's like the final thing, right? These festivals are about discovery. It's such an awesome thing that we get to do, but you have to be at the right moment in your career for it to work, right? You have to you have to be ready for that festival sort of appearance to sort of take advantage of all the other things that are going on in your career. It doesn't really do a lot to just be there. It does a lot to be there at the right time.
Speak to that a little bit more about being ready for this moment, and why is it a moment, or why does it have to be at the right time of your career? Why does that matter?
Well, I think, look, generally you're going to play in front of a lot of people who don't know you. Not to say there's not going to be, your audience won't show up, but
Sure.
the right festival slot at the right time means that you're getting exposed to people that have never seen you. So I think your show has to be at the point that it can connect with those types of people, and all the other things that are going on in your career, when you're going to come back to the market next, what kind of product you have out, what sort of is going on with you in terms of your general audience building and your following and how you're communicating with that following. So I think that if you have a little bit more maturity around that and you're thinking about it strategically, like, hey, you know what, I'm going to play this club show this time, and if I sell it out, all right, maybe that means that like the next time I go there, that I'll have enough people who are going to bring their friends to my festival set that'll make that festival set robust enough that it was the right time to play it. So none of this is, there's no scientific equation to this. It's why agents and managers and bookers have their jobs, because there's a lot of art to this. And there's a lot of just sort of nuancing, all the different things that are going on. Also, look, Outside Lands is just one play in a larger plan for a lot of these artists, where they're coming from, where they're going to, all these different factors. All of that has to align in the right way. And again, the best managers, the best agents are ones that are talking to the bookers, strategically in that regard.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of, when it's the right play at the right time for the artist, but you mentioned kind of these like artists that might have played the market. They have that fan base of maybe a little bit that will show up to their maybe early daytime sets. So when we're like talking about those early daytime sets, and you've mentioned kind of their play in the market a couple times now. I'm curious, like, if that also goes into the consideration, whether it's like, how do you balance a national artist maybe that has these massive numbers online, but maybe hasn't toured the Bay Area ever, and you don't really know what their hard ticket numbers are, versus maybe someone who's been grinding for years on the club circuit, maybe even the theater circuit a little bit, don't really have much of a national like celebrity presence, let's say. Maybe they don't have the numbers, but they're kind of road dogs. Like, talk to me about balancing that out when it comes to the numbers versus the social media numbers, these elusive, online numbers versus like the hard ticket numbers in the market that you referenced a couple times.
Yeah. I mean, I think the good thing about a festival is that as bookers, as people who are programming, we can kind of, take some different shots, right? To your point, like we can see if an artist who just has a really strong kind of online following and is kind of newer, but hasn't really proven themselves, in the particular market, we could take a chance and say, hey, you know what, like, because we're looking for this particular thing. And I should have said at the beginning, all right, that's like the key component for us is we are trying to build that sort of diversity of things, right? So like, hey, let's just say, I don't know, we feel like, we don't have enough hip hop on the festival this year. And there's an artist that, is being pitched to us that is like, hey, maybe they haven't had a record out in a while, but they're a classic act and everybody's going to know them. And we know what we have like the right slot for them because here's who else is on the bill that day. All right, cool. Let's go with that. It doesn't matter necessarily what their last play was in that circumstance. It's like, we know this is going to resonate. The same can be true on the other side of the spectrum, which is, hey, you know what? We don't have, I don't know, enough indie rock. And like this band's really bubbling up in that scene. And yeah, maybe they don't have the same thing as like a more established artist, but like, let's take a chance on that one when we're booking it in the fall or, early winter, because we know they have product coming out, right? Yep. In, March when, the festival, season is really kicking. All right, let's go ahead and like, because we have this other artist on the festival that they'll be a good complement to their audience. Will want to see that audience. One of the nice things is, you in this day and age of digital stuff, right? There is a lot of access to understanding sort of the interconnectivity to some of these artists. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build things that sort of have that real synergy as a lineup.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So talk to me about, there's in the kind of the insider music industry community and parodied on a lot of these like Instagram accounts, like assistants versus agents and all of that. I want to talk about the poster for a second, because there's always this battle over the poster. And for people that maybe aren't as much into the weeds on this kind of a thing, like, I know that probably goes into a bit of the consideration with the agents of just like whose name is higher, the font size, all of that. I think, I believe it was the Misfits that for the Coachella poster last year, like was the first time in history that they actually got their logo on the poster, which like we'd never seen before happen. So talk to me about the conversations in the deal making process with these agents in terms of the lineup, and just how all that works in the construction of the poster.
Well, look, that's why we're very fortunate to have bookers who can manage a lot of different conflicting agendas and desires from the artist community and sort of massage that to make it work. So yes, it is a conversation. Every one of these bookings is, a bespoke particular thing, Right. This is what sort of we can do for you. This is how, I have this need for an artist. It's important to this. All right, well, let's try and make that happen for you. But, here's what we need to do over here. So it's a lot of sort of just interplay, music industry, collaboration ultimately. And because these agents and managers are dealing with the bookers on so many different things on a daily basis, they're always trying to find ways to make things work for people. And, I think on the other side, most of the agents and managers we deal with, ultimately understand that, hey, we have these things that we've got to make fit together. So their priorities have to fit within that. And it's not easy. It's really hard work. I feel personally very grateful that, we've got such talented people that do that. led by Alan Scott on our team, who, from another planet, who's really the kind of the mastermind behind that stuff. But he's got, awesome people around him too, that are these bookers that really kind of care. They really understand all of these details matter to everybody. Right. And so you just have to continue to sort of thread the needle and kind of massage this thing here to make that thing fit over there. And it is, like I said before, it's art. It's not science.
In your history of running festivals and being part of this, whether it's Bonnaroo or Outside Lands, or do you have any stories or any experiences where it came down to the poster or the name, or somebody missed out, or there was some kind of negotiation, a fee versus a name placement or anything like that? I mean, we've heard here and there that, once a poster gets announced, like once in a while somebody like throws a fit and drops off or something like that. But I'm curious if you got any stories of that in the past.
I'm sure it's happened, but honestly, and I think Superfly has probably produced, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 major festivals at this point.
Yeah.
I can't really remember any specific examples of that thing blowing up a deal. I can remember lots of heartache around those negotiations. I can remember lots of frayed, conversations and relationships and stuff. People get ruffled feathers. But look, I think the music community, for as kind of wily as it is, ultimately, like, people understand that you gotta ultimately make a deal. You gotta find a compromise. And no, I think most of the time you find the right accommodation, and you just have to care about it. You have to put the work in to make it work.
You're not going to give me what I want, Rick. I want the juice. I want the real. I want someone throwing a hissy fit and throwing something across the room. And no, I'm just kidding. That's all good.
All right, what I will give you. Okay, just as a quick thing, because what was going on in my mind, and I didn't say it because you were more like, hey, did it derail something? But, there's this sort of famous thing in the Bonnaroo history of, what happened with Kanye the first time he played, and, this whole kind of thing where he went on at like 5 a.m. and, the genesis of it was around his stage placement. Where we had originally booked him, and where he, kind of demanded that he play, as sort of his career was sort of taking off in the midst of the festival season. It was sort of the genesis of that story, is that he wanted to play on the main stage, and we had to sort of shoehorn him in there. And that was what led to sort of the whole kind of crazy Bonnaroo Kanye thing. So there's a little for you.
Yeah, I think anyone who's ever interacted with him is going to have a little crazy story probably at this point. When it comes to, I guess, getting more into the business of it all and like talking numbers a little bit, explain to somebody maybe who isn't familiar with the festival business and how it relates maybe to the concert business, in terms of just like how artists are compensated, just like at the very, very core. A lot of people might not understand this, especially in the age of, how artists are compensated, I think, just across the board, it's very elusive. We're hearing stories left and right of how artists can't afford to tour anymore, how costs have gotten so expensive, how, just the price of everything, and let alone, they're not making money on, record sales anymore, and streaming is not really supporting them like, sales used to. There's not really much tour support anymore from record labels, especially if you're, an indie artist. So all of that as the backdrop of, okay, and I hear from managers and from artists and agents and stuff like that, it's just like, we got the festival spot is kind of what can hold them up financially for a little bit. But just break it down at its very core, like, how does the money flow? How does that work when it comes to compensation of these musical acts?
Well, the festival thing is very simple. Everybody's paid on a flat. That's it. And so it's a much less sort of complicated process on the front end of booking and on the back end of settling. It's, just here's the number. Every now and then there might be some things that relate to production or relate to some special needs, especially, the top tier artists. But, for the most part, really festivals are simple. And that's kind of part of the whole opportunity of a soft ticket play for an artist, right? Is that like, you know what you're getting paid, and you're not really, the one that has the pressure of selling the tickets. And so, look, that's the converse to sort of a regular concert where you have all the pressure of selling the tickets, and you're really kind of a partner in the economics in a very distinct way. And so that's why the sort of, the sort of push and pull of whether people are playing a hard ticket or a festival, it goes back to that strategy that we talked about earlier. It's sort of that even unto itself as part of the mix of like when it makes sense for an artist's cycle to, hey, have a flat, no, I'm getting this money versus, hey, maybe a little bit more risky and having to, have a guarantee, but still, some of the economics coming on the backside of it.
When it comes to production, we've seen there are some standout performances at various festivals that make headlines and that stand out as kind of some of the all-time great festival performances, and in part because the production is so massive. I'm curious if how does that work? Like, who covers that? Does the festival cover those production costs? Does that go into the guarantee that you're paying the artist, and of that guarantee the artist is going to decide, are they going to have a 150 person marching band that's on stage with them, or is it just going to be them and a DJ? Like, how does that actually come into play?
Yeah, for the most part, we're providing the venue and providing all of the basic sound and lights production. And, the artist is sort of controlling and paying for specifically what is, kind of their, distinct production, how big their show is from an artist's perspective, how many musicians, what they're sort of delivering, and then any things that are sort of special, distinct for their show. We might provide some economic support to that, depending on the situation. Some of it has economic consequences for us and how many stagehands we need, or what piece of equipment we may need during load in, or when you can load in. Obviously you don't have sort of your traditional sound checks and your ability to sort of control that environment. So everything kind of has to work within, what we call festival production, what we are sort of, putting as the baseline. And then, kind of it gets kind of edited from there. I think for a lot of artists, the opportunity, and sometimes maybe, the thing that, is as not as attractive, is that you have more of these confines, right? So sometimes that's really good because, hey, you can focus on a particular type of show and you don't have to have as much production. Sometimes, if a big stadium act really wants their full show with the thrust and, the whole thing, maybe it's harder to do it in a festival environment. So that's kind of, we're always kind of trying to accommodate as best we can. We want artists to bring their full show, but sometimes you just have those, distinct limitations of what we can and can't do there.
Yeah, well, how does that work? Because, does anybody really get a sound check or a production check? And how do they load in a full show, like you mentioned? If, if they're like the second to last artist on the main stage or something like that, I'm assuming they're not really going to be able to bring in a full production. Do the headliners are they the only ones that get a sound check? Can they set up the stage, or how does that all come into play?
Every level, every situation is a little different, but, we before we open doors, we have, artists doing, certain sound and line checks. We're basing the production for sure around like what the headliner needs, and then, trying to fit everybody else into that. The later you get in the schedule, the bigger the artist, the more, that they have control. You're second up on the main stage. Yes, we're making accommodations from them. Maybe the first artist up, it's like, hey, this is what you got to fit into.
Right.
So again, like everything else, there's a finesse, and a nuance to it. But we're very, our disposition is we want the artists to put on the best show that they can. And so we're always trying to work with them to find that best ground that we can.
Nice. How did you get involved in all of this, Rick? Like what brought you to experiential entertainment, to festivals and all of this? Give me a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah. So like many of us in the industry, I'm a hack musician who, played in bands in high school, and I was the guy always trying to, get the gigs or set up the shows so we could play. And then I moved to New Orleans, to go to Tulane, and like almost instantly, like I can remember the exact moment when I was watching George Porter, the bass player from the Meters, play at Muddy Waters, a club that doesn't exist anymore. And I remember watching him play and being like, I can't do that. Like, I can't keep up with that. Like, that's not for me. And from there, but I loved this aspect of sort of being around, bringing people to experience music and to learn about new music, to have that communal experience. Like, it was just flowing through me as something that I knew, I really cared about. So I started working at the world famous Tipitina's Music Club in New Orleans. And, that's where I met, my partners, in Superfly. And, when sort of we decided to move on from there, working at the club, we started thinking about, putting on shows on our own. And so Superfly started really around putting on shows during Mardi Gras and Jazz Fest time in New Orleans. That was sort of the main activity at the very beginning while we were still college students and, had other jobs and things like that. It was sort of a part-time thing for the first couple of years. But what was really, I think, fortuitous about it for us is even though we became a regular concert promoter for a few years at the very beginning, it was those special event times. It was those times where we could actually sort of be, in a sense, more of a producer of an event than just a promoter. And what I mean by that is like we had an opportunity to create like a brand, create like a little bit of a imaging sensibility of what the event was. Obviously when you're a promoter, you can do that a little bit in the confines of your venue, but what you're really kind of doing is promoting the band that's coming through town on that particular day. Right. When you're creating a special event, when you're creating, a festival, you're really creating kind of the container and the brand for those artists to, kind of be exposed, hopefully, to new audiences and new collaborations and new things. And this is when we also started doing these Super Jam concerts where we started, bringing artists from different bands together. And one of the things we learned from that was like, hey, why these collaborations that we wanted to see as fans, the reason that they, weren't happening was not because the artist didn't want to do it, is because there was not a producer, somebody like us saying, hey, what if you do this cool thing? What if you play in this unique environment? What if you play on this different type of stage in this different type of way? And, that was another unlock for us to realize that kind of what we were really good at and what we really had a passion for was this idea of sort of producing these events. We were able to parlay that into creating lots of different types of experiences, but the same sort of general kind of concept was, hey, what can we do creatively to take something that exists there and build upon it and be more of a producer?
Yeah, I mean, I went to Jazz Fest this last year in New Orleans. And New Orleans is like my second home. I get there like a couple times a year. I got family there. I love it. It's a magical city, and it makes a lot of sense that was kind of the impetus for it. And for people that don't know, about Jazz Fest, it's like the festival happens as much outside of the fairgrounds as it does in the fairgrounds. Arguably, it happens more so outside of the fairgrounds during those 2 weeks, and it does. And this last year, I was at Preservation Hall, and a buddy of mine who plays guitar in the Preservation Hall band, he like texted me at 5 p.m. that day. He's like, I know you're a big Dave Matthews fan, but don't tell anybody, but you probably want to get here at midnight tonight. And sure enough, I'm there. And he comes and sits in with the Pres Hall band, and there's 80 people around, but that's like happening, all night, every night, all over the thing. And Tipitina's, of course, being a central ground for that. And that's Makes a lot of sense. And the Super Jam, people that don't know, of course, is like one of these tentpole moments at Bonnaroo every year, which is always a lot of fun. I think a highlight that people look forward to. And so, but how do you go from just curating these like experiences from at Tipitina's to Bonnaroo, which launches this massive festival at Bonnaroo?
Well, just to pick up on what you're talking about, when we first started putting on concerts at night during Jazz Fest, there really wasn't the type of scene that you're talking about there. In fact, one of the amazing things was the major theaters that were on Canal Street in downtown, the Sanger, the State Palace, and the Orpheum, were dark. We always joked that, like, in any other town, if there would be hundreds of thousands of music fans in town, like promoters would, be in a knife fight to get a hold of those venues.
Right.
Nobody was doing that stuff. So we pioneered a lot of, not to say clubs weren't putting on shows and there were people doing stuff, but we definitely took that to sort of another level. And by the peak of our Jazz Fest, event, we were, I think, selling 30 or 40,000 tickets, over those 2 weekends, and utilizing 10, 15 different venues around town, from really unique venues like the, Cage and Queen Riverboat, the Masonic Temple Auditorium, that were dark venues that, you had to bring everything in to all your typical club and theater venues. And it was within that soup that we started to see that people were coming down specifically for our set of shows. Yes, they were also going to the fairgrounds and experiencing everything there, but the hook to come down was these nighttime concerts that we were doing, some of which were, going till sunrise. We kind of pioneered some of that stuff because New Orleans didn't have a last call. And sometimes we had too many artists for the amount of sort of space that we had. We're like, well, you want to start at 2 a.m.? Sure, we'll start at 2 a.m. People will stay up. And it was within all of that we started to think about, hey, can we take what we're doing here and can we do that in a different environment? At the time, we were all going to a lot of festivals, me and my business partners. Some were going to festivals in Europe. Some were going to this, small emerging festivals that were happening in the country. We're obviously deeply inspired by the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival itself, the proper Jazz Fest. And we were looking around at these things and being like, why isn't there like a big camping European style festival in America? One of the other things that was going on at the time is the band Fish, who we were, very closely paying attention to, were doing their big, large scale gatherings. And this was one of the things that existed after Woodstock 99. It was in a period where there was a lot of consolidation in the business. This is at the beginning of what is Live Nation today. And what you had there was sort of a lot of the powers that be and the established promoters really focusing on sort of the summer concert amphitheaters and sort of the experience that was going on there, and not as much on these sort of non-traditional opportunities. I think there was some fear because of Woodstock 99 and, about amongst the bigger promoters. In a lot of ways, we were, young kids. We were in our mid-20s. We were the fans. We always tell people that if, like, hey, somebody else had done Bonnaroo, we would probably have been some of the first people to buy tickets to it. Me and a couple of my partners, we all went to, the first Coachella because we thought it was representative of that European festival style. So that was a bit inspirational to see, like, hey, a young promoter like Golden Voice and Paul could do something like that. It wasn't a direct line, but it was like definitely an inspiration. Like, this can happen. And when Fish was kind of on their hiatus, when they weren't playing for a year, we knew that audience, the audience that was really good at camping, that could kind of put up with that environment and that really wanted like this all-encompassing, full-blown, transport me to a different world experience. We kind of were like, hey, this is an opportunity right now. We can maybe fill that void. And because we were working with a lot of the artists in that scene, we knew that. And a lot of our Jazz Fest programming was also pairing those artists with artists that were inspirational to them or that were probably different genres, but that we knew that kind of had a good fit. That was sort of the kind of initial idea behind Bonnaroo was, hey, let's take what we're doing here at Jazz Fest, but let's do it in that other way and see if we could fill a void. We had no idea it would be that successful. We were very fortunate that it was, but it was a clear something that was missing that we wanted to see if we could create that special thing.
Right, and that's, I mean, as Bonnaroo is become, I mean, I guess now it's so mainstream, but like at the time it was like a jam festival. I mean, I remember at the start of it, I mean, it was like a lot of these jam bands were kind of playing it, and you had a diverse lineup, but yeah, it was like spearheaded by a lot in that jam community. I think you had like Widespread Panic and Trey and all of that, and it was like that string cheese incident I remember at the early times, and it was like this Humphreys McGee early. It was like this festival that just like the jam community could wrap around, and you had that ethos that was woven throughout. So, oh yeah, it's yeah.
Ari,
cool.
one thing to mention on this is at the same time, we always knew that it couldn't be just that, right? That it had to, be more diverse, and it had to be malleable enough that like it could, have a great diversity of artists. We're just music fans, right? And one of the things that's going on at this time is digital music is just coming into people's lives where they have access to so many different types of music. And so even if you look at the early lineups, we still had the Sonic Youths and the Del McCourys and the Jurassic Fives. Like we're trying to program the first lineup. If you look at our collateral, it was like very decidedly like not hippie. We did not do tie-dye t-shirts and stuff like that. And so we knew, and look, this leads us to, in a lot of ways, back to, this conversation, what we do with Outside Lands, right? It is about making sure that you're kind of creating like something that has a soul to it at the same time. Like there's a programming philosophy, but at the same time, really diverse, really trying to attract lots of different types of audiences. And I think that is, really an important part of the festival booking art form. You see a lot of these festivals out there that might be a single genre thing, or they might be trying to just hit, something that's sort of mainstream and pop. And then some of those work and some of those come and go. And I'm not here to, sort of critique others, but I think what's special about kind of what we and our partners on Another Planet are striving to do is really curate something for like the hardcore music fan, the people who like lots of different types of stuff, knowing that they'll bring their friends, knowing that they'll have this, awesome experience.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, Rick, thank you so much for breaking all of this down and the just kind of the business behind the festival creation. And I mean, it's you've had such a storied career in this space, and it's cool to get a glimpse behind the curtain once in a while to how all this works. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
Well, what I think is really cool about where we're at in music today is that building community around music has never been easier, right? There's tools, there's a desire from the audience to like connect with things that, are meaningful and to have community. I think one of the sort of push and pulls of the digital life is that it means that real world experiences matter to people even more, and community and connection matters even more. And so to me, like that's what's so special about creating in this time is that, the things that bring people together, these important, sort of art experiences are, I think, become more and more of a premium, especially if you build community and connection and authenticity around those things.
Love it. Rick, thank you so much. It's great.
Likewise. Thank you.
This episode was edited by Peter Schrupp with music by Grassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.